You've never felt sand like this. It's not the soft, beachy kind that clings to sunscreen or sticks between your toes on a family holiday. This sand is older, drier, finer than flour. It sifts through your fingers like forgotten stories, or like something that never wanted to be touched at all. You're standing on the edge of the desert again, wrapped in layers of linen that itch slightly at the neck, with a satchel slung over one shoulder and a sun-warmed scarf trailing behind you like the tail of a lazy comet. And you're not entirely sure why you agreed to this. There's a smell here of dust and leather and the faintest suggestion of cinnamon. And in the distance, someone is muttering to a camel in a language that sounds more like weather than speech. You squint. The sun is low and sticky and golden, the kind of light that makes shadows stretch longer than memory. Behind you lies the city, still faintly awake, with clanging pans and bargaining voices. Ahead of you, nothing, or rather not nothing, but dunes. Endless dunes. Hills that move when you're not looking. That sigh when you step wrong, that whisper things like maybe this isn't such a good idea. But here you are. Boots already powdered with grit. Heart beating a little too fast. You're not a warrior or a pilgrim. You're not even a particularly brave merchant. But you've been hired sort of, and you're walking now, step after step, into what will become one of the most confusing, uncomfortable, and strangely peaceful journeys of your life. Your companions don't talk much. There's the caravan master, an older man with skin like cured wood and an expression that has never once said please. He communicates mostly by clearing his throat or lifting an eyebrow, which somehow carries more weight than most speeches. Then there's a boy, maybe 12 or maybe 50, you can't tell with the dust, who runs ahead and whistles like he's herding goats made of wind. There are a few other traders, quiet types, robed and hooded and perpetually chewing dried dates with expressions like bored turtles. No one says much, but there's a rhythm to it. A shuffle, a clink of saddlebags, the occasional complaint from a camel that seems less like annoyance and more like existential dread. And speaking of camels, you're not ready for them. They look at you like they've already judged your entire soul and found it unimpressive. Their eyes are heavy-lidded. Their mouths chew side to side like they're grinding your self-esteem into pulp. One of them belches loudly, and the smell is unforgettable in a way that feels like a mild insult to your ancestors. But these animals are sacred out here, not in the holy sense, but in the you literally can't cross this place without them kind of way. You try to approach one to maybe pet it or say something polite. It sneezes at you. The boy laughs. The caravan master grunts and nods east. The sun's leaning that way too, as if it wants to escape behind the dunes before it sees what happens next. You adjust your scarf, trying not to choke on the fabric and fall in line. The sand crunches in a way that sounds dry even in your ears. Every step is work, the kind that makes your thighs protest and your boots whisper cruel things about blisters. And you've only been walking for 7 minutes. You learn quickly that desert travel is not about drama. It's about repetition. Step, breathe, sip water. Step, shift the weight on your shoulder. Step, wonder if that rock was here before. It's not thrilling, it's not poetic, but it is strangely hypnotic. Your thoughts drift. You think about what you left behind, small things like the wooden spoon you forgot to return to the innkeeper, or that one pair of socks you really should have packed. But then your brain empties, not in a scary way, just quietly, like the sand has crept in through your ears and decided to mute the usual noise. By midday, the heat has wrapped around you like a wet blanket that somehow feels dry. You didn't know sweat could feel chalky. The sun presses against your scarf, and even blinking feels like a chore. But the caravan keeps moving, slowly, patiently. You try asking the boy how much longer until the next rest stop. He shrugs. Until the camel stops, he says. That's not helpful. Eventually, you reach a patch of flat rock where the group pauses. No shade, no trees, just slightly less sand. You sit awkwardly and pull out a scrap of dried fig from your bag. It's too sweet and somehow gritty. A camel makes a noise that might be laughter. You decide not to respond. There's something oddly comforting about the silence. The wind doesn't howl. It hums. The sky is too bright to stare at, but you can feel the hugeness of it above you, pressing gently down like a warm ceiling. No one here is checking the time. No one is making lists. Everyone just exists, step by step, sip by sip. When the group moves again, it's slower. The sand is shifting now, little ripples, dancing like lazy fish. The sun is lower. Shadows creep back into the folds of fabric. The caravan master hums something under his breath. It might be a song or a curse. You don't ask. You're starting to understand that out here questions are expensive. You walk until the sky turns orange, then violet, then the strange inky blue that doesn't feel like night but doesn't belong to day either. A star winks above the dunes, then another, then 10,000. You hadn't noticed how bright the stars were before. You hadn't noticed how loud your thoughts used to be. Someone hands you a blanket. You curl up near your camel, who's already asleep and snoring like a grumpy accordion. The sand still clings to your boots, your hair, your lips. But you don't brush it off. Not anymore. You'll walk again tomorrow. You'll learn about maps that don't use paper and negotiations that happen without words. You'll get lost once, maybe twice. You'll drink tea made from boiled roots and swear it's the best thing you've ever tasted. You'll hear a story from a man who's crossed this desert more times than he's eaten bread. And you'll start to feel something strange inside you, a kind of calm that only comes from being very small in a very big place. But for now, you sleep. The stars blink above. The wind hums below. The desert doesn't care who you are, and somehow that makes it easier to breathe. You wake up covered in dust. Not the alarming kind, there's no emergency. Just the gentle, polite layer of sand that seems to find its way into everything out here. Your eyelashes, the folds of your blanket, the seam between your thoughts. It's morning now, barely. The sun hasn't quite shown itself yet, but the horizon is yawning open in slow pinks and sleepy oranges, like someone left the sky in warm water overnight and it's starting to bleed color again. You sit up, stretch. A few joints complain, but in that cozy way, like your body knows it worked hard yesterday and forgives you. The camel next to you shifts its weight with a groan that sounds suspiciously judgmental. Someone's already boiling water over a tiny fire made from twigs and camel dung. You pretend not to notice the ingredients. The air smells like mint ash and morning, and it's in this moment, as you dust off your knees and sip something hot from a dented tin cup, that the obvious question finally arrives. Why do people do this? Why leave cities with roofs and beds and actual bread just to drag yourself and your smelly, grunting livestock across weeks of nothingness? The short answer is stuff, but the longer answer is much more interesting, or at least long enough to keep you company until you doze off again. See, the desert might look like it has nothing, but it actually connects everything. Cities, kingdoms, people, ideas, rumors, gods, diseases, lovers, regrets. The trade routes that crisscross these sands are like dusty veins in the body of ancient civilization. And people have always wanted things they don't have. Over there, they've got silk smooth and bright as beetle wings, so fine it slips through your fingers like a sigh. You want silk, but you don't live over there. You live way over here. And between you and the silk is 1,000 miles of hot boredom. So, what do you do? You hire a caravan. You tie down your courage. You squint at the horizon and hope. Or maybe it's salt. Ordinary, right. But in some kingdoms, salt was once worth more than gold, more valuable than rubies. Salt preserves meat, seasons, food heals, wounds, fills bellies. Salt lets armies march farther, lets cities grow fatter, lets humans taste life a little more vividly. And you've got it, lots of it, buried in crusty slabs beneath the sun-baked earth. And they want it, desperately. So you trade, you walk, you suffer a little, and you earn. Some people cross deserts for spices, not just to flavor food, but to make medicine perfumes, incense, for temples and thrones. Some carried amber from the Baltic or lapis lazuli, so blue it made poets forget to rhyme. Others brought horses or slaves or scrolls or myths that changed the shape of entire religions. But not all of it was luxury. Sometimes what waited at the other side of the dunes wasn't treasure. It was survival. A well. A river. A patch of fertile earth where a tiny city could bloom like a stubborn flower. Families needed food. Craftsmen needed tools. Temples needed offerings. Soldiers needed payment, and someone had to bring it all through the dust. That someone might be you. Not a hero, not a villain. Just a person in sandals trying to carry a little bit of something to someone else who needs it more. And yes, sometimes people walked these deserts for reasons that had nothing to do with trade. Pilgrims carrying prayers heavier than their packs. Runaways looking to disappear behind a dune and never be found again. Messengers with scrolls sealed in wax and hearts pounding like hooves. Spies pretending to be merchants. Poets pretending to be useful. All of them following the same lines in the sand, hoping the desert wouldn't eat them alive. But let's go back to the stuff. You reach into your bag. There's not much in there. Some dried apricots, a handful of clinking coins, a strip of cloth dyed indigo. But it's enough. Enough to matter. Enough to prove you have something to offer. And that's kind of what this whole journey is about in the end. People trying to prove they matter to someone else. Somewhere else. Far away. The fire crackles. A donkey sneezes. The boy is already up brushing sand off his sleeves like it insulted his mother. You notice the caravan master standing a few feet away, arms folded watching the sky like it owes him money. He catches your eye, gives a grunt that might mean, "We leave in 10 minutes," or "You look like a confused radish." Hard to say. You stretch again. Your feet still ache. Your mouth tastes like wool. But you understand a little better now. The desert isn't a barrier. It's a bridge. A weird, hostile, sand-covered bridge that sometimes eats people, but a bridge nonetheless. And people cross bridges because on the other side is more. More food, more trade, more answers, more questions, more people who haven't heard your jokes yet, more stories to carry. And if you're lucky, if your boots hold up and your camel doesn't hate you too much, there might even be home waiting on the other side, or at least a place to take off your shoes and not get sand between your toes for 5 minutes. That would be nice. There's no official ceremony, no horn blasts, no ribbon cutting. No one hands you a badge that says, "Hello, I'm a trader. Now." Instead, your initiation comes in the form of a shared look, a nod, and a camel that lets you get within spitting distance without actively spitting. A milestone. You stand in the cooling morning light, clutching the strap of your bag with a little too much determination. Everyone else seems calm, like they've done this 100 times, maybe 1,000. Their robes flutter like lazy sails in the breeze. Their hands move with the ease of long-practiced habit. There's no rush, but everything gets done. Saddles tightened, water skins, checked dates, stuffed into pockets, insults whispered to uncooperative animals. You, on the other hand, have managed to trip twice on the same rock and accidentally offend a goat. Not your best morning. The caravan master, whose name you still don't know, walks past you and grunts. It's unclear if that means well done or Please stop standing like a confused scarecrow. Either way, you take it as approval. He continues on adjusting, nothing correcting no one, yet somehow making everything around him feel accounted for. This is his caravan, not yours. You're just tagging along, a speck in the sandstorm of his responsibilities. You're a camel, who you've secretly nicknamed Princess Hissy Face, snorts, and refuses to move when tugged. You try again. No response. The boy from earlier walks past, clicks his tongue, and the camel immediately follows. Of course it does. You try not to take it personally. You've been assigned a place near the rear of the line. It's where the newer travelers go, where the least likely to be helpful end up, but also where the best stories are, because no one listens to what gets whispered at the back of the caravan. Which means that's where people say what they really mean. There's an old woman riding a donkey who tells fortunes in the form of very unhelpful riddles. You ask her if the journey will go well. She smiles with too many teeth and says, "Only the shadow of the last lizard knows for sure." You thank her, like that meant anything. There's also a spice merchant named Farid, whose voice is always just a little too loud. He complains about the heat, the dryness of the figs, the number of camels. He once claimed he could smell a sandstorm an hour before it arrived. Everyone rolled their eyes. He wasn't wrong, though. And then there's you, listening, observing, sweating. The line begins to move. There's no grand departure, no trumpet fanfare, just the soft pad of hooves and the low creak of leather. You walk step by step into the desert, and with each footfall, you feel yourself becoming something else. Not quite a trader, not quite a wanderer, something in between. The sun rises, then climbs, then presses. You learn the value of the scarf tied around your head, not as a fashion choice, but as a survival tool. Shade, filter, privacy, even a nap blindfold, multi-purpose, ingenious. You start adjusting it just like the others. You're learning. At the midday break, someone hands you a flatbread, so dry it feels like biting a sand tile. You chew anyway. Someone else shares a sliver of cheese that's older than most small villages. You chew that too. You learn that sharing food, even terrible food, makes you part of something. The caravan master walks among the group, his eyes scanning the horizon like he can see through sand. He doesn't say much. He doesn't need to. When the wind changes direction, he changes course. When the camels shuffle nervously, he halts. He knows this land the way birds know air. And you try to copy him without looking too obvious. That night you sit around a small circle of coals and flickering flames. No one sings, no one dances, but there's a quiet sort of comfort. The boy tells a joke that makes the old woman snort into her soup. Farid talks about his hometown with a softness you didn't expect. Someone else starts carving a small figure from bone. The stars are louder than the voices. You stretch out on a mat, thinner than hope, and stare up. No rooftops here, no city smoke. Just an unfiltered sky, ancient and smug, twinkling with the calm indifference of time. You think about all the other people who've walked this path, thousands of feet, thousands of stories, all crushed into the same shifting ground. Your muscles ache. Your skin feels crisp. Your brain is half mush, but there's a tiny part of you that feels good. Not happy necessarily, but solid, real. Like you belong, even if only a little bit. You turn over. Your camel lets out a grunt and shifts closer as if to say, "You're not completely useless, I suppose." It's the highest compliment you've received all day. You fall asleep to the sounds of desert life, the whisper of wind through dunes, the soft clink of gear, the murmured dreams of people you barely know. You are officially part of a caravan now. You didn't think it was possible for an animal to look both exhausted and condescending at the same time. But here you are, face to face with a creature that seems absolutely certain you are the least impressive thing it has seen all week. And it lives in a desert where most of what it sees are rocks, thorny bushes, and other camels. Camels don't care. Not about your plans, not about your confidence, not even about the snack you tried to offer earlier. They took one look at your dried apricot and sneezed in its direction like it was an insult. You've spent less than 3 days with these animals, and already you understand the pecking order. You are beneath them, several levels below, possibly in a different emotional species entirely. And yet, somehow, they're everything. They carry the goods, they carry the water, they carry people who've run out of feet, or patience, or both. Camels are the ships of the desert, and yes, they've earned the title partly because they move with a swaying rhythm that makes you feel slightly seasick, and partly because they seem to float through terrain that would defeat any other animal. Today, you're assigned a camel of your own. The caravan master gestures toward it with a look that says, "Try not to ruin this." You approach slowly, like you're introducing yourself to a grumpy neighbor. The camel regards you sideways. You say hello. It burps, affectionately, probably. The boy walks by and pats the camel on the rump. "She likes you," he says. You don't believe him, but you choose to pretend. It's better that way. You hoist your pack onto the saddle, which sits atop what appears to be a small lopsided mountain of wool leather and mystery smells. The camel does not flinch, does not blink, just chews something invisible and lets out a noise like someone sighing into a kettle. You've heard stories, camels that refused to move for 3 full days because they didn't like the look of a traveler's shoes. Camels that sat down in protest halfway across the Sahara and would not budge until sung to. Camels that have perfect memories and will absolutely get revenge if you wrong them. You don't know if any of it's true, but the glint in your camel's eye makes you think it's better not to test fate. Walking beside your camel is like walking beside royalty, who's begrudgingly agreed to carry your junk as a favor. Every so often, she grunts or huffs or swings her head in your direction as if to remind you who's actually in charge. And weirdly, it works. The caravan moves steadily, the sand shifting and crunching underfoot. The camels plod on with the patience of creatures who've seen entire civilizations rise and fall between one watering hole and the next. You start to admire them. Their feet spread wide, leaving soft, deliberate impressions. Their eyelashes are so long, they look like they were designed by an ancient mascara deity. Their humps, yes, there's just one in this case, sway gently with each step, rhythmically, almost hypnotically. They move like the desert made them, and in a way it did. Camels can go days without water, shrug off heat like it's a bad joke, and eat thorny bushes that would make goats weep. Their nostrils close during sandstorms. Their knees are padded. Their stomachs are multi-chambered. They were built not just for survival, but for service. And yet they complain constantly. Every grunt, every groan, every side-eye. Camels are like reluctant heroes in a bedtime fable, overqualified, underappreciated, and deeply uninterested in your opinion. You stop for a midday break under the thin shadow of a rock. Your camel settles down with the dramatic flair of someone who has suffered greatly. You brush some sand off her side, offer a sliver of dried melon. She sniffs it and then eats it without acknowledging you. You take that as a win. Fareed, the loud spice trader, settles nearby. Camels, he says, waving a hand vaguely. You can trust a camel more than most men, but never let it know you need it. You nod solemnly, as if you've known this your whole life. Later that afternoon, you're invited to ride. The camel kneels with all the enthusiasm of a teenager being asked to clean a kitchen. You climb aboard, gripping the saddle like it's your last connection to the world of the upright. And then she rises. It's not graceful. First the back legs, then, after a long pause for dramatic effect, the front. You're tilted at such an alarming angle that your soul briefly considers leaving your body. But then you settle, high above the sand, wobbling slightly like a decorative fruit bowl on a jelly shelf. And suddenly, you feel magnificent. The wind brushes past your ears. The desert stretches endlessly ahead. You are floating on a beast that looks like it's thinking about taxes and revenge at the same time. But you are moving, covered in dust, a little sore, and full of fig-flavored regret, but moving. And for a brief moment, you understand. This is how empires were stitched together, one camel at a time, not by conquest, not by sword, but by these long-legged, long-suffering creatures, huffing, chewing, trudging along like they've got eternity on a leash. As night falls, your camel settles down again. You whisper something to her, thank you maybe, or sorry, depending on how she's feeling. She exhales through her nose and closes her eyes. You think it might be the beginning of a beautiful, very one-sided friendship. There is an art to packing for the desert, a kind of dusty, quiet poetry, not the kind that rhymes, but the kind that, if you get it wrong, might kill you slowly and politely over the course of a week. You sit cross-legged in the sand, surrounded by a small hill of things you thought were essential. A blanket, a small knife, 3 pairs of socks that will never feel truly clean again, a small mirror you're already regretting, and a pouch of dried plums that seemed like a good idea until they fused into one large, sticky monument of regret. The caravan master walks past and eyes your pile. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't have to. His eyebrow does the talking. It says, "Do you plan to open a boutique halfway through the dunes?" You sigh. Time to repack. There's no single list, no universal checklist that says here's what to take when you're crossing 1,000 miles of empty. Every trader, every traveler, every tired soul who's done this before has their own philosophy. Some pack light. Some pack like they're moving house. Some pack for survival. Some pack for trade. And the smart ones, they pack for both. Because you're not just surviving, you're selling. And no one wants to buy from someone who smells like desperation and forgot their soap. So, you begin again. First water. Not just one skin. Not just 2. You tie every flask you can get your hands on to the saddle. Some are leather, some are ceramic. Some make your hands smell like last week's soup. Doesn't matter. Water is currency, comfort, and clarity. You treat it like treasure. Second food. Not meals, not feasts, just fuel. Things that last longer than your patience. Flatbread, dates, cheese so dry it might qualify as a rock. Nuts that you will get sick of, but still hoard like a jealous squirrel. You pack them in little cloth bundles tied with twine, and you try not to eat all the good stuff on the first day. You will fail at this. Everyone does. Third shade. You can't carry trees, but you carry their cousin scarves, wraps, cloaks, bits of dyed linen wide enough to drape over your head and shoulders like a traveling tent. The desert doesn't just burn skin, it bakes thought. And shade, even a little, can keep your mind from turning into a roasted potato. Fourth tools. Nothing flashy. Just the things that quietly save your life. A flint stone, a thread and needle, a tiny brass compass that doesn't always behave but seems to point somewhere useful, a spoon, a second spoon in case the first one gets dramatic and disappears into the sand, a coil of rope, a coil of hope. Fifth, things to trade. This part is tricky. You can't carry too much, but you can't carry too little. A few bolts of cloth dyed indigo, woven tight. A pouch of glass beads that catch the light like starlight. A jar of dried herbs that smells like someone's idea of healing. And 2 carved combs you bought from a man who claimed they once belonged to a prince. You don't believe him, but someone might. 6th secrets, not written ones, just quiet things tucked into pockets. A letter, a charm, a pressed flower, a tiny wooden turtle you've had since childhood. These aren't necessary. They aren't practical. But in the desert, when the wind gets mean and your thoughts turn loud, They matter more than rations. You try to lift the pack. Too heavy. You remove a blanket. Still heavy. You stare at the plum brick again and decide it's emotional baggage at this point. Eventually, you balance it. Not perfectly, but enough. The boy from the caravan watches you with amusement. You forgot socks, he says. You show him the 3 pairs. He shakes his head. You'll need 6. You'll lose 1. 2 will turn into sandpaper. 1 will fall in a fire. You ask how he knows. He lifts a foot and wiggles his toes. No sock. You add 2 more pairs. Then comes the part you hadn't expected, packing your mind. There's no room in the desert for worry you can't carry. You learn to leave behind the small complaints, the unpaid debts, the awkward goodbye, the thing you wish you said to someone who probably forgot your name. You pack instead the things that help you keep going. A story someone told you about stars being holes in the sky. The rhythm of a lullaby. You barely remember the feeling of being seen by a camel for the first time and not being immediately sneezed on. Mental luggage. Surprisingly important. By late afternoon, your belongings are lashed to your camel's sides. It looks at you as if to say, "This is excessive, but I'll allow it." You pat her gently, and she chews in approval. Or disdain. It's hard to tell. Fareed walks by and eyes your bundle. "Too tidy," he says. "If it doesn't rattle you, packed it wrong." You consider adding a bell, just to annoy him. The caravan master comes over, checks your water, your boots, your straps. He says nothing, but he tightens 1 knot. That's the closest he's come to a compliment so far. As the sun leans west, you feel ready. Sort of. Not in a heroic way, not in a movie music swell kind of way, but in the way that says I've done the best I can. And now the sand gets to decide the rest. You tie your scarf, sling your satchel, and walk. Behind you, the city disappears like a footprint in wind. Ahead, 40 days of dust. And you're carrying just enough to make it. Maybe. No one shows you a map on your first day. There's no scroll unfurled, no line drawn in charcoal across parchment, no bold red arrow that says, "You are here." In fact, most of the people you meet on the caravan don't seem to believe in maps at all, or at least not the kind you can fold. Instead, they carry something much older, something quieter, something that lives in gestures, in stories, in the backs of their eyes. You begin to notice it slowly. At first, you assume the caravan master is just lucky. He pauses in the right places, turns at the right dunes, avoids the steep slopes, and always just when your throat feels like a piece of sandpaper left on a fire, he leads you somewhere with water, not a river, not a lake, but just enough. A tiny pool hidden behind a wind-carved bluff, a dip in the ground where the sand smells sweet and damp, a spot where you can push your fingers into the earth and feel something cool move beneath your nails like a secret, finally relaxing. You ask the boy how they know where to go. He shrugs. The old ones remember. Then he tosses a pebble in the air and walks away, whistling like a person with no secrets whatsoever. But later that night, while the wind hums through the sleeping camp and your camel snores softly beside you, you hear two elders speaking in low voices. Their language twists like smoke. You don't catch most of it, but every so often you hear something familiar. A name, a stone, a tree that no longer exists, a spring that sings in winter. You realize they're not giving directions. They're remembering. And memory in this place is a map. The next day, you try to pay attention. The caravan turns west at a dune shaped like a sleeping lion. The master tilts his head, squints at the horizon, and raises a hand. You see nothing, just more sand. But the group follows without question. An hour later, you reach a place where the ground looks no different, but the camels begin to move faster, ears forward, tails flicking with energy. They know. And then a patch of green. Not much. A few shrubs, a cluster of reeds, but it smells alive. You step down, dig with your hands. The sand is damp. Someone brings out a small basin, sets it in a shallow dip, and waits. Slowly, a trickle, a whisper of water, clear, cold. You blink. How did they know? No one says. But that night the boy draws in the sand with a stick, curving lines, strange shapes, hills, arrows, dots. You ask what it means. Water, he says. Old water, lost water. Water we hope is still water. You nod like that makes sense. He smiles like you're finally learning something. These aren't maps like the ones you're used to. They don't promise precision. They don't sit in libraries. They sit in backs of minds passed down like lullabies and warnings. You hear one man say his grandmother told him the desert used to be a garden. Another swears he once drank from a spring guarded by a jackal. You believe them both a little, because belief out here is half of survival. Sometimes when you rest under shade, you notice the elders tracing invisible shapes in the air, or muttering names under their breath. Al-Namar, Zaitun, Raqqa. You think they're recalling old oases, or perhaps simply remembering friends they lost near those places. One evening, Farid the spice trader shows you something surprising. He lifts his robe and reveals a patch of skin on his upper arm, marked with tiny dots and lines. Tattoos, he says. My father's map. Just in case. You lean in closer. The design is simple, geometric, but he taps each shape with reverence. This dot is where my brother was born. This curve is the river that's now a ghost. And this, he pauses, this is where we pray for rain. You ask if it's accurate. He shrugs. Accurate enough. More than paper. That's when it hits you. In the desert, the best maps aren't drawn. They're remembered, woven into songs, etched into scars, pressed into stories that change shape slightly with every telling, but still lead you somehow to where you need to be. They say the desert is unforgiving, that it eats the unprepared. And it's true if you bring only compasses and coin, it may never speak to you. But if you listen, really listen, to the old man who hums when he walks to the camel that lifts its nose at just the right ridge, to the way the wind curls when dusk arrives, you'll begin to hear the map beneath the silence. It won't be clear, it won't be neat, but it will be enough. As the fire dies down and the stars blink overhead, you take a stick and start drawing in the sand. A circle for the spring, a line for the ridge, a small triangle for the tree that's really just a memory now. You don't know if it'll help anyone, but it helps you. And maybe someday, someone will find your quiet little map. And thank you. It's hard to explain how you know where you're going out here, because the truth is, you don't. Not in the usual way. Not in the turn left at the third palm tree and continue for 600 meters kind of way. Out here in the dust-colored belly of the desert, knowing doesn't look like certainty. It looks like squinting. Your second week in the caravan begins with a sunrise so pink it feels like someone spilled rose water across the sky. The camp stirs slowly. Yawning camels, clinking pots, quiet murmurs that sound more like weather than conversation. You pack up your things and fall into the rhythm again, falling into line without anyone telling you where to stand. No one needs to. Everyone just knows. You ask the boy again how the caravan master finds the way. Stars, he says, tossing a stone and catching it midair, and wind and shadows, and sometimes a bird. That's not helpful. But it is in its own frustrating way. You watch the caravan master for clues. He doesn't carry a map. He doesn't look at the sun and shout coordinates. He just moves, tilts his head, waits, walks. You notice how he tests the ground with his foot before picking a route, how he lingers at certain dunes watching how the wind pushes the sand. Sometimes he'll pause, look at the way a stone lies in the dirt, and change direction. It's less like reading a map and more like reading a whisper that forgot how to be loud. You begin to understand. Out here, navigation isn't about direction. It's about observation. The world gives you hints if you're slow and humble enough to notice, like the sun. The desert sun isn't subtle. It climbs fast, burns hot, and tilts shadows like clock hands if clocks were made of silence and regret. You start to recognize time, not by hours, but by the shape of your own shade. When your shadow is long and dramatic, it's early. When it hides under your feet, like it's ashamed of you, it's noon. And when it stretches behind you, like it's trying to run home, the day is ending. Then there are the stars. You've never really looked at them before. Not like this. Not with the intensity of someone whose life quietly depends on tiny lights suspended in nothing. But now each night as you lie on your woven mat with your blanket pulled to your chin, and your thoughts drifting like slow sand, you start to memorize the patterns. The belt, the hunter, the curved ladle pointing toward north. The boy once pointed up and said, "That's the one the wolves avoid." You're not sure what he meant, but now you avoid it too, just in case. Sometimes the wind helps. It speaks softly but clearly if you listen with your cheeks. It pushes the sand into certain curves, little clues about direction. A dune shaped like a crescent might tell you where the wind came from, and therefore where it's going, and therefore maybe where you should too. Animals help too. You watch the birds. Not many out here, but enough. When one flies low, looping in lazy circles, someone always pays attention. Where it lands, there might be water, or at least shade. Camels, too, have their signs. They sniff, they grunt, they adjust their ears like sensitive weather vanes. When they walk faster, without being told, that's a message. Something good is ahead, or something bad is behind. But perhaps the most surprising compass in the desert is sound. You wouldn't expect it. There's not much noise out here, after all. Just the soft hiss of sand, the occasional belch of a camel, the muffled conversations of tired people. But even silence has textures. If the wind whistles sharply, it means a narrow pass. If it hums low and warm, it's likely open ground. And if it suddenly stops altogether, something's coming or hiding. You start to walk with your ears open. It feels strange at first, like listening with your skin. But soon, it becomes natural. You start noticing how the crunch of sand underfoot changes depending on direction. Dry sand sounds different than wet sand, which sounds different than wind-packed ridges. You ask Fareed once how he knows when they're close to the next waypoint. I smell it, he says. You raise an eyebrow. Smell. What hope? He grins dramatically, then adds, also dung. Usually dung. Someone was here before. And he's not wrong. Sometimes it's a smell. Sometimes it's the way a dune curves in on itself, like it's guarding something. Sometimes it's just a feeling, an itch in your feet, a whisper behind your thoughts. You learn that the desert doesn't hide its signs. It just doesn't shout. You have to lower your own volume first. Quiet your fear. Quiet your plans. Quiet the loud part of your mind that always wants answers printed in bold. Only then do you begin to sense it, the slow language of sand, the alphabet of wind, the grammar of shade. You will still get lost sometimes. Everyone does, even the best. But being lost here feels different. Less like failure, more like a pause. A moment to re-listen, to re-see, to wait for the land to tell you something new. One evening, while the fire dies and your head sinks into your rolled-up cloak, the caravan master sits beside you, quietly. No announcement, no lecture. Just the soft creak of his knees as he settles in. He pulls something from his robe, a small stone, worn smooth, not remarkable at all. He places it in your palm. You see the mark, he says. His voice is gravel, wrapped in time. You do. A tiny line, barely there. This stone sat at the edge of a well for 300 years, he says. Wind made the mark. You nod. He doesn't explain the rest. He doesn't need to. In the morning, he's gone again, walking ahead, adjusting his scarf, scanning the horizon with those unreadable eyes. You follow. Because out here, following isn't weakness, it's trust. And trust is how you learn to find your way when there are no roads. No one told you not to yell. They didn't have to. You figured it out on your own about 5 minutes after trying to shout over the wind to ask where your water flask went. It wasn't a dramatic moment. You didn't get scolded. No one gave you a lecture or a side eye. But the moment your voice rose above the hush of the caravan, something shifted. A camel turned and stared at you like you'd just insulted its entire lineage. The boy stopped walking and blinked. The wind seemed to pause. Even the sand, restless and always moving, seemed to flatten for a second, as if bracing for whatever foolishness you were about to do next. And you realized you don't raise your voice in the desert. Not because it's rude, but because it's wrong. Loud things don't belong here. The desert isn't silent. It breathes, it hums, it whispers, but it does not scream. And when you do, the land seems to fold itself away from you, just a little, as if it doesn't trust you with its secrets anymore. So you stop and you listen. That's how you learn the first rule of desert etiquette. Quiet is survival. The quieter you are, the more you notice. You begin to hear the delicate crunch of sand beneath worn sandals, the rhythmic puff of camel breath, the creak of a leather strap under strain, even the rustle of someone adjusting their scarf becomes a small symphony when your ears adjust. And beyond that, you start to hear tone. Not just words, but how they land. A murmur between traders might be negotiation, or flirtation, or warning. A sigh could mean exhaustion, or offense, or approval. You learn to read the length of a silence, to understand what a sideways glance means, a lifted chin, a pause before answering, no yelling necessary. The boy tells you one night, as you sip gritty tea beneath a threadbare sky, that yelling wakes things. What kind of things, you ask? He shrugs. The kind we don't talk about. Then he grins. Also, camels. They don't like it. He's right. Camels especially don't like yelling, or clapping, or sudden bursts of enthusiasm. They respond best to soft murmurs, slow movements, and bribes that involve dried fruit. You once watched a man try to rush a camel by shouting at it and flapping his arms. The camel simply sat down, closed its eyes, and went to sleep. A perfect protest. The man eventually gave up and apologized. The camel did not forgive him until someone brought raisins. The older traders speak to their camels in low, gravelly tones, almost affectionate. More like they're speaking to old friends than animals. You find yourself mimicking this after a while, whispering encouragements or complaints under your breath. Your camel doesn't respond. But she doesn't bite you either. You count that as success. Farid, who is by nature incapable of true silence, tells stories in the evening that begin with grand gestures and booming voices. But even he dials it back during the day. His loudest moments are now carefully rationed, like water. He saves his best material for when the sun is low and the shadows are long and everyone's ears are relaxed enough to enjoy it. Because in the desert being loud isn't powerful, it's wasteful. The same is true with movement. You don't stomp. You don't wave wildly. You don't sprint. The heat alone makes sure of that, but the culture reinforces it. People here move like the desert itself, slowly, deliberately, without wasted energy. Even arguments, when they happen, are done in hushed tones with eyebrows and shoulder shrugs and long, deep breaths between each sentence. You once watched two traders argue over a cracked pot for nearly half an hour without raising their voices once. Just gestures, squints, pointing gently at things. The pot didn't get fixed, but no one lost their dignity. There's a sort of reverence to the silence, not fear, just respect for the place, for each other, for the fact that everything here is already hard, so why make it harder with shouting? You remember your old life before the desert. Streets full of clanging pans, barking dogs, people talking too loudly about things that didn't matter. Horns, hammers, street sellers screaming about mangoes and fish and soap. You didn't hate it, but you never noticed how loud it was until you left. Now in the desert, even your thoughts feel like they've turned down the volume. You daydream in soft colors. You remember in whispers. You walk beside a woman who hasn't spoken to you once, but who always passes you a sliver of bread when you look hungry. You share water with a man who only grunts in reply, but who adjusts your scarf when the sun shifts. These aren't quiet people. They're just desert people. Their kindness doesn't need a narrator. You find you like that. And when you need to speak, really speak, you do it the desert way, face to face. No yelling, no rush, just words offered gently like a cup of water. At night, when the stars come out and the fires burn low, the air fills with stories. But even then, it's soft. You lean in to hear. You savor every word, because here, quiet is not absence. It's intention. It's the space where meaning lives. And the desert listens, so you learn to listen back. There's a quiet kind of tension that follows you through the desert. Not loud, not obvious, just a slow, dry whisper that says, you are not alone. Even when you can't see anyone else for miles, especially then. You hear stories, of course. Every trader does. Tales of bandits who ride under the moonlight, faces covered in cloth blades, silent and curved like questions with no kind answers. They don't yell. They don't announce themselves. They just appear like a mirage that doesn't disappear. Farid loves telling these stories, usually after dinner, usually with dramatic pauses and wild hand gestures. He always adds flair bandits who ride on sandstorms, who can shoot arrows through water skins at 100 paces, who never take gold, only secrets. But the elders don't interrupt him. They just listen. And after the story's done, they go and check the ropes on the camels one more time. You ask the boy if the stories are true. He doesn't answer. He just lifts his shirt and shows you a scar that snakes down his ribs like a dried-up river. Some of them are, he says. And that's all he says. You stop asking after that. The truth is, danger does exist out here, but it's not the kind you think. It doesn't come charging over dunes like a thunderstorm. It creeps. It waits. It watches from a distance, calculating. Because in the desert, even the thieves are patient. And that's what makes the next rule of desert life so strange, yet so oddly practical. Most trouble is solved with conversation, not swords, not screaming, not showdowns under the stars, just negotiations. You come to understand this the first time the caravan stops unexpectedly. There's no sign of danger, no arrows in the sand, no masked riders, just 3 men on horses waiting beneath a rocky outcrop with expressions that are somewhere between, "We're thinking about robbing you, and we'd rather not have to get up." They wave. Your caravan master waves back. You expect a confrontation, a standoff. Instead, they meet in the middle. They talk, softly, for a long time. You can't hear most of it, but from where you sit, you see body language, hands, nods, a few raised eyebrows, and then laughter. 15 minutes later, the strangers ride away. No blood, no drama, just dust and hoof prints. You ask Fareed what happened. Bandits, he says, chewing a date pit. Polite ones. You blink. Polite? He shrugs. They don't want to fight. Too much effort. They just want to be compensated for letting us pass. Paid off. Bribed, he says, nodding with flair. You think he's joking, but the caravan master confirms it later with a grunt and a single word, toll. You learn this is common. In the desert where law is mostly wind and wishes people make their own systems, if you control a pass or a spring or a well-worn path, you have power. And power means you can ask for things. Sometimes it's gold. Sometimes it's trade goods. Sometimes it's a single saddlebag of salt. Sometimes it's a story or news or an old grudge that just wants to be acknowledged. These negotiations can take hours. No one rushes. Bandits, if you even want to call them that, usually come prepared. They bring tea. They ask about your camels. They compliment your dates. And somewhere between the small talk and the snack exchange, someone decides how much you'll pay. You find it oddly comforting. No one wants to die out here. Even the thieves have chapped lips and sore feet. It's not always safe, of course. Sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes a young hothead in the caravan says something he shouldn't. Sometimes a bribe is refused. Sometimes trust evaporates faster than water under noon sun. But those times are rare, because as it turns out, boring is better in the desert. Boring means everyone gets to walk away. Boring means you still have your wares, your water, your skin intact. Boring means both sides live to haggle another day. You begin to respect the way your caravan master handles these encounters. He's not flashy, not loud. He speaks slowly, like each word has to pass through a committee in his chest before it's allowed out. But people listen, even the bandits, especially the bandits. And when the tension breaks, when the deal is made, there's often a joke. Something about camels, or dates, or the weather being too hot for conflict. You've never seen a battlefield where both sides walk away grumbling about sand getting into their robes. You ask the boy later why the desert doesn't have more violence. He looks at you like you've missed the obvious. Because it's already trying to kill us, he says. Why help it? You nod. You understand now. Out here, survival isn't about dominance. It's about balance. The next time a group of men blocks the path ahead, you don't panic. You sit. You sip water. You watch the quiet ballet of desert diplomacy unfold. You see the slow nods, the shared raisins, the little dance of pride and concession, and eventually the wave of parting. Another night, another safe journey, and the desert stays quiet. You spot it long before you reach it, a smudge of green on the horizon. Not much, just a shimmer of something not sand. The wind changes slightly, warmer, wetter. The camels perk up. The boy starts humming under his breath. Farid suddenly stops complaining. You know what it means. You've found an oasis. Or rather, it's found you. Because that's how it feels when you stumble upon one of these places. A little patch of miracle tucked like a secret into the dry folds of the world. You've seen mirages before, little tricks of light that make puddles out of dust and rivers out of sky. But this is real, palm trees, real ones, waving lazily like they're showing off. A pool of water that actually moves when you squint. And less romantically flies. So many flies. But still you feel your shoulders relax. The desert isn't done with you yet, but it's offering a temporary truce. As you approach, the oasis becomes more than a dream. It becomes noisy. Children laughing, camels groaning, merchants yelling over prices like they've never heard of quiet. It's a pop-up city, made of cloth tents, sputtering fires, and people who've been waiting to talk for days. There are traders who sell soap made of olive oil and spices. Women with baskets of figs, so ripe they bleed sweetness. Old men sitting under awnings, playing games with tiny stones and sipping tea like it's a competitive sport. And through it all, water, cleanish, coldish, flowing from a spring you can't see but can definitely hear gurgling softly under a mat of moss. And memories. You want to dive in, but you settle for splashing your face and cupping a handful to your lips. It tastes like hope, and maybe some goat hair, but mostly hope. The boy warns you not to drink too much, too fast. Your stomach will tell stories you don't want to hear, he says. You believe him. You saw what happened to Farid last time. You keep your sips humble. You set up camp beneath a crooked palm, its fronds rattling gently in the breeze. The camels are unroped and left to wander within reason. You watch yours flop dramatically onto her side with the satisfaction of someone who knows she has earned her nap. This place is supposed to be heaven, and in many ways it is. But heaven, it turns out, is a little crowded. The flies, the noise, the smell of too many people who haven't seen soap in days, the occasional screaming toddler wielding a chicken like a weapon. Still you smile, because out here you take heaven, however it comes. Even if it includes a man loudly selling pickled turnips and a goat chewing your sandal. You wander the market. You trade a bit of cloth for a pouch of almonds. You almost buy a dagger with a jeweled handle before realizing the jewels are painted pebbles. You help an old woman carry a bucket of water, and she rewards you with a dried fig that tastes like childhood. Every now and then, you hear news of distant cities, of shifting alliances, of a caravan that never returned, of rain somewhere long ago. You file these things away in the back of your mind, not because you need them now, but because someday, somewhere in the desert, one of those facts might save your life. That night you sleep like royalty. On sand, yes. Under a blanket that smells vaguely of camel, but with a full belly and the soft burble of water nearby. You dream of green things, of rivers, of places where people plant things instead of packing them. In the morning, the caravan master gives you a nod. That's your cue. The oasis was never meant to keep you. It was a pause, not a destination. You pack. You refill your flasks. You avoid the man selling magic beans and the woman offering to read your future using only the pattern of dust on your kneecaps. You saddle up. Your camel gives you a look that says, "I was just getting comfortable." You whisper an apology and offer her a date. She eats it and immediately forgets you exist. Classic. As you leave the oasis, the noise fades. The palm trees shrink behind you. The water becomes memory. And the desert welcomes you back like a host who never left. The wind picks up, the sun climbs, and you feel the familiar weight of dust in your boots. But something is different. You carry green inside you now, a little sliver of softness, a reminder that not all of the desert is harsh, not all the journey is suffering. Sometimes in the middle of nowhere, you find a tiny paradise full of flies and figs and laughter. And for a moment, just a moment, you remember why you started walking in the first place. You don't speak the language. Not really. Not any of them. There are too many to count. Too many vowels. Too many accents. Too many words that mean 3 different things, depending on how you breathe them. And yet somehow you get by. Because here on the long, slow arteries of sand that connect cities, empires, kingdoms, tents, temples, and inns that haven't had fresh lentils in months, language is more than words. It starts with the eyes, a sideways glance from a stranger across a spice stall that says, "I'm looking to trade. I'm not in the mood. I've seen that camel before." It continues with the hands. Palms up mean offering. Palms down means stop. A finger across the chin means the price is ridiculous. And a shrug means fine, I'll take it anyway. And if you're lucky, really lucky, you'll get a smile. Or something close to it. A crinkle around the eyes. A twitch of the mouth. An upward tilt of the eyebrows that seems to say, you don't belong here. But you're trying. That counts for something. You walk through markets that sound like music you've never heard before. Loud, layered, offbeat, but somehow still familiar. Traders shouting numbers. Children laughing at jokes you can't understand. Old women haggling in sentences made entirely of sighs and hand claps. You learn to listen for rhythm instead of grammar. The merchant who sells dyed cloth has a cadence like waves smooth rising and falling, like she's singing the price instead of stating it. The man with the copper pots uses his hands like punctuation, tapping each lid with flair at the end of every sentence. And Fareed, of course, knows just enough of every language to be dangerous. You suspect half of what he says is made up, but he delivers it with such confidence that no one questions him, including you. You try. You learn the basics. Yes. No. How much? Too much. Do you have a cheaper version that won't fall apart immediately? You practice at night repeating phrases until your tongue stops tripping. You ask the boy how to say thank you in the dialect of the last town. He tells you, then laughs. Turns out he taught you how to say your goat smells like onions. You say it anyway. People laugh. You make a sale because that's the thing. On the Silk Routes, communication is survival. You don't need to speak the same language. You just need to want the same thing. Salt, spices, figs, fabric, friendship, a way forward. So, people learn each other in pieces. You start recognizing gestures from other caravans. The way some people offer their left hand for trade and their right hand for peace. The way certain tribes greet each other with 3 taps on the chest. The way some offer tea before talk, while others begin with silence and let the desert speak first. And eventually, you stop feeling like a foreigner, not because you've mastered the language, but because the road itself begins to feel like a tongue, a long, dry, winding one that whispers to everyone the same phrase, we're all trying to get somewhere. Even the camels know it. They grunt in universal disapproval. They chew like diplomats. They blink slowly in every dialect of disdain. At one oasis, you watch a deal unfold between 2 men who clearly don't understand a single word the other is saying. One speaks in a clipped mountain dialect. The other sings in the long vowels of the coast. But they nod. They point. They clap once. They swap items. They smile. It's beautiful. Language on the trade routes isn't about mastery. It's about meeting. Meeting halfway, with signs, with food, with coins, with kindness. You once trade a bar of soap for a pair of sandals by acting out the concept of sweaty feet in the middle of a dusty square. no words, just exaggerated sniffing, dramatic fanning, and a deeply committed grimace. You got the sandals and a free fig. That night, the boy asks you how you managed it. You tell him I spoke fluent nonsense. He nods. Most traders do. As the caravan moves on, you notice you're speaking less. Not because you're tired, but because you don't need to speak as much anymore. Your hands talk, your eyes talk, your pauses talk. And when someone does speak, you really listen. Because words are rare out here, expensive in a way. So, when people offer them, you treat them like gifts. One man tells you the word for dust in his language means skin of the earth. Another says their word for camel is the same as patience. A woman sings a lullaby in a dialect you've never heard, but somehow you cry at the end anyway. Because language isn't always sound. Sometimes it's shadow, or smell, or touch, or silence. You fall asleep that night, thinking about all the words you'll never learn, and how strangely that doesn't feel like a failure, just a reminder that sometimes understanding has very little to do with vocabulary, and everything to do with being present. It's dark, the kind of dark that doesn't feel heavy or frightening, just soft, like the desert has pulled a blanket over the sky and told everyone to hush. You're already awake, not because someone woke you, not because of danger, just because. The stars are out, more of them than you remember being possible. A full galaxy scattered above your head, like someone tipped over a box of glittering nails. They don't blink. They burn, cold and constant and ancient. And then you hear it. The sound of the caravan getting ready, not loud. Just movement, a rustle of fabric, a soft tisk to coax a sleepy camel. The creak of leather, a whisper passed between travelers, like a thread being tugged through fabric. You rise slowly. The ground is cold against your palms. Your scarf is still damp with breath, but the night air is kind, cool, but not cruel. You wrap yourself up, sling your bag over your shoulder, and fall into line. Tonight, you're traveling in the dark, because the day is too hot, too bright, too much. But night is forgiving. The moon is just a sliver, like a secret. Your shadow walks beside you, barely there. The sand crunches gently underfoot, drier than language. Farid hums a song low and wordless, a rhythm, a compass. Others join in, not all at once, and not in harmony, but with shared breath. It's not music for performance. It's music for motion. These are the star songs. No lyrics, no instruments. Just fragments of melodies that help you move. Old lullabies, caravan chants, hummed prayers to gods no one remembers, but still believes in at night. You don't know the tune, but you find yourself humming too. It helps. It fills the silence without disturbing it. It keeps your feet in time. It keeps your mind from drifting too far into thought. You pass through narrow gullies, moonlit dunes, strange shadows that look like sleeping giants, and still step after step you move. The boy walks beside you for a while, says nothing, just tosses a pebble up and down, catching it in rhythm with his steps. Even his game has tempo. You ask him quietly if he prefers traveling by night. He nods. Fewer questions, he says. Fewer flies. He's right. No buzzing, no shouting, no scorching heat or squinting into sun. Just you and the stars and the song of sandals and hooves and breath. You pass another caravan going the opposite direction. You don't stop. You just nod. A blink. A small wave. Two rivers of people flowing past each other in the dark, each carrying something precious. Maybe spices. Maybe silk. Maybe sorrow. You look up again. The stars haven't moved. But you have. You remember the caravan master once told you, if you don't know where to go, follow the cold light. It doesn't lie. At the time you thought it was metaphor. Now, you think he meant it. Navigation by stars isn't easy, but it's honest. The stars don't shift like dunes. They don't vanish like mirages. They stay. Steady, distant, reliable. You walk until your legs become mechanical, until your thoughts unravel, until your eyes start blinking longer and longer and longer. The caravan pauses. A rest. You sit down, lean against your sleepy camel. She lets out a low groan of complaint, but doesn't move away. You sip water that's warmer than you'd like, but still sacred. Someone hands you a date. You chew slowly. Sugary. Soft. The taste of survival. The stars above you blink. No, you blink. They stay still. You wobble. You pull your scarf tighter. Close your eyes for just a moment. You dream on your feet of a city made entirely of stars, of camels with wings, of roads made from threads of silk leading to nowhere and everywhere. A whisper wakes you. Time to go again. You rise. Walk. The stars have shifted slightly now, a few degrees, enough to remind you the earth is turning. Even when it feels still, it spins. And you move with it, quietly, humbly, in song. You walk until the horizon begins to blush, until the edge of the world softens into color, pink, gold, dusty blue. A watercolor morning. The night pulls back. The stars vanish one by one, like shy actors leaving the stage. And ahead, a new stretch of desert. You don't remember exactly how far you came, but your feet do, and the song lingers in your bones like a compass, like a comfort. You don't need a clock. You've got the stars. You've heard stories, not just the ones Fareed tells after dinner, though those are good too, usually involving cursed rubies, magical goats, or a bandit who turned out to be his cousin. No, these are older, quieter, heavier. You first heard this one as a whisper passed between traders near a desert fire, one where the wind blew sideways and the flames bent like they were listening too. The story of salt and gold, not spice, not silk, not fine porcelain or scrolls of poetry, just salt and gold and the long, dry, gritty line between them. It takes place not where you are now, but farther west, across the Sahara. A desert so vast, it swallows sound. So hot the sky itself seems to shimmer with thirst. But people crossed it, again and again. On foot, on camelback, with hope packed between bricks of salt, so dense they thudded like stone. You see in the ancient cities of West Africa, places like Ghana, Mali, Timbuktu, gold was plentiful. It glittered in riverbeds. It winked in crowns. It passed from hand to hand like a casual blessing. But salt was everything. It kept meat from rotting. It kept people alive. It flavored bland porridge and cured illness and balanced trade. A body without salt withers. A kingdom without salt cracks. So from the distant mines of Tagaza and beyond, traders carved blocks of salt from the earth and tied them to camels. Heavy, precious, unassuming. And then they marched across wind-sculpted dunes, past mirages, through silence that hummed like pressure in your ears. They followed routes known only to the oldest among them, trails marked by half-buried stones, by the bleached bones of former mistakes. The salt caravans were long, dozens, sometimes hundreds of camels, each one carrying the weight of kingdoms. When they arrived weeks later, sunburnt and worn and whisper-thin from the effort, they did not unload, not yet. The trade itself was a ritual. You imagine it now, a flat stretch of land outside the city. The gold traders arrive and place their offerings in silence. Gold dust, nuggets, coins. Then they leave. Then the salt traders come, inspect the piles. If the gold is good, they take it and leave their bricks of salt behind. If it's not enough, they walk away without a word. No shouting, no haggling, just quiet, trust, dust. A silent market. Sounds like a dream, but it happened. Salt for gold, gold for salt, value for survival. You think about this now as your own caravan moves forward. You don't carry gold. You don't carry salt. But the spirit of the trade is the same. You carry need, and someone else carries answer. Maybe it's cloth for bread. Maybe it's stories for shelter. Maybe it's a bar of soap for a better seat at a fire. But the trade is always there, always humming underneath the journey. You ask the boy if he believes the salt for gold story. He shrugs. Why not people trade stranger things? He's right. You once saw a man trade a camel bell for a kiss. Another traded a poem for a pair of shoes. Fareed once claimed to have traded 3 dates and a polite compliment for a horse. You didn't believe him until he showed up with the horse. There's magic in trade if you squint. not the wand-waving kind, the kind where two people who have nothing in common still find something to give. You dream about the salt mines that night. In your sleep, they glow like glaciers, white, cold, heavy. You dream of men carving the ground with slow precision, stacking bricks like treasure. You dream of sandstorms hiding gold, of camels with golden saddles and salt dripping from their hooves. In the morning, you wake up with a dry tongue and a new respect for something as small as a pinch of seasoning. You eat a piece of flatbread, sprinkle it with a grain of salt from your pouch. Chew slowly. It tastes like history. It tastes like the Sahara, like trade, like memory, passed hand to hand, like a journey that mattered. Eventually, even the most determined caravan needs walls. Not many, not fancy ones. Just 4, maybe 5, and ideally, a roof that doesn't fall on your head in the middle of dinner. And so, you arrive at a caravanserai. It's hard to pronounce and even harder to describe to someone who's never needed one. But think of it like a roadside inn, built by someone who really wanted you to lower your expectations before arriving. The walls are high, thick stone meant to keep out both wind and wandering hands. The gate is wooden, reinforced, creaky, and always about 3 seconds away from falling off its hinges. Inside, it's a square courtyard, open to the sky, full of dust boots and camels who've stopped pretending to be majestic. This place is not glamorous, but after days in the open desert, with only sand dunes for pillows and camels for conversation, it feels like a small miracle. A very loud, very smelly, slightly crumbling miracle. And you love it instantly. You step inside and inhale the scent of old bread, warm hay, boiled onions, and exhaustion. There's a man snoring in the corner, a child chasing a chicken across the courtyard, and a woman yelling something at a goat in a language that seems made entirely of vowels and accusations. Your room, if you can call it that, is a stone cell the size of a generous closet. There's a mat, a lantern with a questionable wick, and a single nail in the wall for hanging your bag. The walls echo every sound you make, as if even the architecture is surprised you're here. You take off your boots, stretch, groan, wonder if the dust in your sock is now part of your DNA. Then you collapse, grateful for anything that isn't moving, because out here, a caravanserai isn't just shelter, it's pause, a reset button carved from stone and stubbornness. It's where you learn new things. News travels faster than wind in these places. You hear about bandits 2 days ahead. You hear about a spring that's run dry. You hear that someone in the next city is paying double for pepper and triple for decent boots. You don't know if any of it's true, but you scribble it down anyway, just in case. Farid finds someone he knows, because Farid always finds someone he knows, and they spend the evening trying to outdo each other with exaggerated tales of sandstorms, near-death camel experiences, and dramatic trade victories. You suspect 80% of it is fiction, but the dates are real, and the tea is warm, and no one cares about truth right now. The boy disappears for hours. You find him later trading riddles with a shepherd over a plate of stale rice and laughing like they've been best friends since birth. You realize this is part of the journey too, not just the moving, but the stopping. You meet a woman from a coastal town you've never heard of. She shows you a scarf embroidered with symbols you can't read. She says it was a wedding gift. She's never been married. You meet a man with no shoes who speaks 6 languages and owns 3 donkeys. He offers you half a pomegranate and asks nothing in return. You give him a spoon from your pouch. He smiles like you've handed him a crown. That night you lie on your mat staring at a ceiling that looks like it's debating whether to collapse. The wind howls through the cracks. Someone in the next room is singing, badly, but with heart, and you feel something strange, safe, not completely, not perfectly, but enough to let your muscles loosen, enough to let your eyes drift closed. The Caravanserai holds you, not gently, but securely. In the morning, you eat lentils that taste like regret, and bread that's more philosophy than food. You fill your water skins. You brush the sand off your scarf for the 1000th time. You nod at the innkeeper, who's never smiled but has always remembered your name. And then you leave, back into the bright, grinning mouth of the desert. The walls fall behind you. The road stretches forward. But for a night, you had a roof. You had stories. You had stillness. And sometimes on long, hot days, when your feet ache and your camel hates you again, you think about that crooked little inn with the uneven stone and the whisper of laughter between the walls. And somehow, that helps you keep walking. You don't remember the exact moment your camel decided to go on strike. It just happened. One moment you were walking together in something close to mutual respect, her ears twitching peacefully, your feet rhythmically sinking into the sand. The next, she stopped, planted her feet, bent her long neck around to look you directly in the soul, and sat. That's it. No warning, no injury, no obvious distress, just nope. You try to coax her up. You pat her side. You offer a dried fig, which she sniffs and then contemptuously snorts onto your boot. You tug gently on the lead. She responds by stretching out her legs and yawning, like this entire caravan is an inconvenience to her afternoon nap. The boy sees you struggling. He doesn't laugh. He just raises one eyebrow and says, "You did something." "What did I do?" you ask. He shrugs. Who knows? Looked at her wrong. Tied a strap she didn't like. Breathed arrogantly. You glance at the camel. She's chewing slowly, blinking like you've disappointed her. You're not sure how, but she's not wrong. Camels, you've learned, are not beasts of burden. They are grumpy nobles who occasionally agree to carry things on their terms when the stars align, and only if you haven't recently offended their delicate egos. The caravan master walks over, squats beside her, and just waits. No talking, no pulling, just silence. After a minute, he pulls out a piece of dried fruit from his pouch and sets it gently near her mouth. She glances at it, glances at him, and eventually snorts, rises, and lumbers forward like nothing ever happened. You blink. That's it. The caravan master doesn't explain, but later the boy does. Camels remember, he says. You ask, remember what? Everything. And you believe it, because this isn't the only time it happens. Sometimes it's your camel. Sometimes it's someone else's. But every so often, one of them just decides they're done. They sit, they groan, they stare into the distance like exhausted poets, and they will not be moved, not by pulling, not by pushing, not by yelling, especially not yelling. That only makes them dig in deeper, emotionally and physically. You learn to wait, and while you wait, you notice things. You notice that the wind shifts a little when a camel sulks, that the other camels give them space as if out of respect, that the humans do too. No one rushes them, no one mocks them. Everyone just lets them feel whatever they need to feel. And eventually, they stand. Not because they were told to, but because they're ready. It becomes a metaphor you didn't ask for, but sort of need. Sometimes you just have to sit in the sand and chew your feelings. You start talking to your camel more after that. Not to command her, just to check in. How's your day? Nice weather today, huh? You're doing great. You don't know if she understands, but she blinks a little softer. She spits a little less. She even lets you scratch behind her ear one morning without glaring. Progress. One evening you watch a young trader get frustrated with his camel. He yells. He pulls. He stomps. The camel calmly turns, lifts its tail, and, well, let's just say the young trader got a very direct response. Camels don't just remember. They retaliate. You begin to respect their boundaries. You stop calling them beasts. You start calling them partners. Because out here, in the quiet between dunes, where the sun bakes thoughts and water tastes like prayer, your camel isn't just your ride. She's your companion, your heater at night, your shade at noon, your stubborn, fuzzy therapist. You walk beside her more often now, not always riding, sometimes just matching her pace. You hum. She hums back, sort of. You think she's warming up to you. And when she stops, you sit with her, not angry, just patient. You don't always know why. Maybe her leg hurts. Maybe her saddle's off balance. Maybe she's remembering something unpleasant from 4 weeks ago and needs a minute. You get it. You've had those days too. Eventually, she stands. And you walk again. Together, a little slower, a little wiser, and maybe, just maybe a little more in tune with the desert, where even the most reliable things have the right to stop and say, not yet. At some point, you stop needing directions. Not because you suddenly know where you are, but because your feet begin to remember what your mind forgets. The desert becomes a story your body knows by heart. You wake up and recognize the shape of the wind. You squint into the sunrise and know whether you'll need your scarf tied tight or loose. You smell the air and know if there's a spring nearby, not because someone told you, but because your body just knows now. This is what happens when you've walked far enough, long enough, slow enough. The desert moves from a place you fear to a place you understand. Not completely, but just enough. It's not a map on paper. It's a map inside you. Every blister you've earned is a mark on that map. Every dune you've climbed and cursed is a folded corner. Every rest stop is a dot etched somewhere behind your ribs. You know that the red ridge comes before the valley with the dry well, that the flat rocks mean a storm passed this way 2 weeks ago, that the birds gathering in that crooked tree mean there's water, or at least hope. The boy asks you one day, "What direction are we going?" You pause. Don't look at the stars. Don't check the wind. You point, and you're right. He nods like that was expected. You're one of them now, not born here, not fluent in the language of sand, but conversational. The older traders call it eye memory, a way of seeing that doesn't rely on seeing. You know where the sun should be by late afternoon. You know when a shadow's shape is off. You notice when the wind feels wrong, too fast, too warm, too flat. Your camel stops, sniffs the air. You stop too. You both feel something, though neither of you has the words for it. Sometimes the boy draws the route in the sand with a stick, not straight lines, curves, swirls, dots where important things happened, where someone was sick, where a deal went well, where you laughed until your sides ached at Farid's dramatic reenactment of a goat falling off a cart. These are the real landmarks, he says. You nod. He's right. You'll forget the exact mileage, but you'll remember the rock that looked like a sleeping lion. You'll remember the dune that caught the sunset just right. You'll remember the cactus with a scarf tied around it. Someone's forgotten prayer, maybe. One night lying on your mat, under a sky so full of stars, it feels like it might break you. Try to draw your journey in your mind. Not the places, the feelings. You trace the panic of your first night, the quiet thrill of your first trade, the soft joy of realizing you were part of the caravan now, the steady comfort of walking beside your camel without speaking. You draw it like a spiral, then a wave, then a heartbeat. You realize something then. This map isn't for finding your way forward. It's for remembering who you were, who you're becoming. You're no longer a traveler with a destination. You're a part of the route itself, a moving dot, a line in someone else's memory, a story waiting to be told under a tent flap years from now. You meet a man with a face like sun-baked leather and eyes that have seen more sand than sky. He says he's crossed this desert 100 times, doesn't carry maps, doesn't carry much of anything. But when he walks the desert, makes room for him. You ask how he knows where to go. He taps his forehead. Up here, he says. Then he taps his chest. And here. You smile. You're beginning to understand. This land, this trail, this 1,000-mile sigh of shifting dust, you don't conquer it. You absorb it, step by slow, aching, beautiful step. And someday, when you're back in a place with roofs and rules and loud voices, you'll close your eyes and find yourself tracing that invisible map again, not to escape, but to remember. That once in a place where nothing stood still, you learned how to keep moving. You find it by accident. A scrap of parchment weathered and curled at the edges, tucked beneath a loose rock near a camel tether. It's not hidden, not really, but it wasn't meant to be seen either, which means you don't read it, not yet. You hold it gently. Paper out here is rare, delicate, more valuable than gold in the right places. You take it to the boy. He glances at it, shrugs, and says, probably a message. Then he adds, people leave them sometimes. Messages, you ask. In the sand, he nods, for someone behind, or ahead, or gone. You feel the weight of the parchment differently now. You still don't read it, but you start to wonder what it says, because the desert, it turns out, is full of letters, not in envelopes, not with stamps, but tucked in the corners of rocks, scratched lightly into the sides of old caravanserais, tied to the legs of birds, etched into the memory of travelers who carry the words inside them like water. You meet a man who remembers a love letter dictated in 3 languages because the sender wasn't sure which one the woman spoke. You meet a woman who once delivered a message wrapped in silk that read, only yes. You hear about a merchant who carried a sealed scroll for 20 years, refusing to open it even after the recipient died. Why keep it? You ask Fareed. He shrugs. Because some words don't need to be read. They just need to arrive. That stays with you. You begin to notice the messages everywhere. A pile of rocks shaped into a crescent. A scarf tied to a cactus. 3 stones stacked carefully beside an abandoned fire pit. You ask the boy what they mean. He says, sometimes it's a code. Sometimes it's just someone saying, I was here, I mattered. You think about that for a long time, because in the desert, where the wind erases footprints within hours, and the sun bleaches memory clean, leaving a message feels bold and tender. You wonder what kind of messages you'd leave if you had the courage, if you had the parchment. You'd write, I'm tired, but I'm still walking. Or, the stars are beautiful tonight. I wish you could see them. Or simply, I remember you, and maybe that's enough. Sometimes the boy hums as he walks tuneless and quiet. You ask him if it's a song. He says no. A message for someone behind us. You don't ask who. You meet an old trader with cracked fingers who carries dozens of letters rolled tightly into the lining of his robe. He doesn't read them. He just delivers them. One time he lets you hold one. It's sealed with wax, heavy. You shake it gently and hear a soft clink, maybe a coin inside, maybe a ring, maybe a stone from a place that doesn't exist anymore. You never find out. But you think about it for days. You start writing your own letters, not to send, just to think, on scraps of cloth, on palm bark, on the back of your hand, with charcoal. Then you erase them, or let the wind take them. But it helps. One night by the fire, Farid asks you what you'd say if you could send a letter to the desert itself. You think, then you say, "Thank you for being difficult." Everyone laughs. Even the camels seem to smirk. But later, as you lie on your mat, under the slow-breathing stars, you wonder if the desert heard you, and if it will reply. The next morning you find a message scratched into a flat rock near where you slept. It's just one word in a script you don't recognize. But the shape of it feels kind, like someone leaving the door open. Just a crack. The boy sees it and smiles. It means safe travels. You smile back. You don't know who left it or when, but you needed it. Because in the end, all messages are the same. They say, you're not alone. You're still part of the story. Someone was here, and someone will come after, and maybe you don't notice it at first, the way the wind changes, the way the sky, usually so certain in its silence, begins to hum. It's not a sound you can point to, not a storm, not thunder, just something, a shift, a breath, like the desert clearing its throat before saying something important. You pause in your steps. Your camel does too. Not in protest this time, just listening. The boy notices. He nods. It's speaking again. You ask what that means. He shrugs. Depends. Sometimes he says it means a storm is coming. Sometimes it means a story wants to be remembered. Sometimes it means someone is about to make a mistake. You wait. But nothing happens. Not yet. The wind picks up. It doesn't howl. It asks. Whispers through the grass like fingers over pages. Rustles the folds of your robe. Blows a small curl of sand around your boots like a signature you didn't write. And then you start to hear it. Or maybe feel it. The desert is saying something, not in a language you speak, not even one you hear with your ears, but in memories that aren't yours, feelings that settle behind your ribs and echo softly in your bones. It says, I have swallowed cities. I have held bones longer than they were alive. I remember every footstep, even yours. It should be frightening, but it isn't. The voice of the desert, if you can call it that, isn't cruel, it's just old. Older than your worries, older than your name, older than stories. You once asked Farid if he'd ever heard the desert speak. He said yes. And he hadn't spoken for 3 days after. Not out of fear, just reverence. Sometimes, he whispered, you realize the sand remembers more than you do. And now, as the sky goes a strange shade of silver blue, you begin to understand what he meant. You feel watched, not by eyes, but by time. The sand feels softer, the wind colder. Even your camel seems to walk quieter, You see shapes in the dunes, maybe old ruins, maybe tricks of light. You hear laughter that disappears when you turn your head. You smell figs, even though no one's cooking. You wonder if you're dreaming, or if the desert is. Later, when the sun finally dips and the heat breaks open like a sigh, you ask the boy again, "Why does the desert speak?" He thinks, then says, "Because no one listens, most of the time." You nod. You've been walking this land for weeks. You've spoken with traders, argued with camels, memorized stars, and left letters in places no one may find. But you haven't really listened. Not to this, not to her. Because the desert, you realize, is not just a place. She's a presence, a mood, a keeper of things no one else wants to hold. Old secrets, unfinished stories, lost names. She doesn't tell you what to do. She doesn't offer directions. She just exists, massive, gentle, occasionally grumpy, always watching. And if you're lucky, very lucky, she lets you pass. You stop to rest. You lie back on warm stone and look at the sky. The wind brushes your cheek like a hand. You close your eyes, and you hear it again. Just one word, not in any language you know, but you understand it. It means stillness. You sleep, and for once your dreams are quiet. No cities, no maps, just sand and peace and the hush of a desert that finally doesn't need to whisper anymore. Because you heard her. You smell it before you see it. Cinnamon, clove, smoke, dust, sweat, hope, the scent of a city. You've been walking for weeks. Your boots are thin. Your scarf smells like every campfire you've ever known. You've memorized the angle of the sun and the moods of your camel. You've listened to the wind tell stories and learned not to argue. And now, finally, you are arriving. It doesn't feel grand. There's no trumpet, no dramatic gate. Just a bend in the road and a slow reveal. Roofs made of clay and wood, domes catching the sun like soft bells, walls the color of dried figs, and people, so many people, moving like a tide through narrow streets, carrying baskets, shouting greetings, bartering loudly for things you can't name. There's music in the distance, a drum, maybe two, a reed flute curling through the heat. It doesn't sound perfect. It sounds alive. You blink a little dazed. Your feet keep walking, but your thoughts lag behind. You're here, you made it. The city welcomes you the way cities always do. Busy, disinterested, too full to notice one more traveler. And yet, someone nods. Someone offers water. Someone points you toward a courtyard where caravans can rest. Your camel groans with relief. You do too. You're assigned a spot near a crumbling wall. There's shade, a little trough of water. The floor is stone instead of sand, and somehow that feels luxurious. The boy disappears into the crowd like a coin tossed into a fountain. Farid is already arguing with someone over the price of almonds. You sit down, lean back, exhale. The sounds of the city rise and fall around you. Children shouting, animals complaining, laughter, hammering, the clink of coins changing hands, and above it all, the scent of spice. You wander eventually, down narrow lanes where rugs hang like flags softening the sun, through marketplaces where traders shout in 5 languages and none of them are yours. You see bolts of silk so fine they ripple like water. You see baskets of oranges so bright they look painted. You see a man selling dates dipped in honey, and you buy one just to feel human again. It's sweet, sticky, perfect. You wonder if this city was worth the journey. Then someone hands you a letter. You don't recognize the person, just a girl with a braid and a fast step. She says nothing, disappears into the crowd. The letter has your name, written in crooked letters. You don't know how. You don't ask. You open it. Inside, you made it. Rest. There will be more walking, but not today. No signature, no mark. But you smile, because whoever wrote it understood what this moment is. Not the end, not the goal, just a breath, a place to loosen your shoulders, a moment to buy something pretty and unnecessary, a day to eat too much and talk too little, a night to sleep on a mat that doesn't shift beneath you. You return to the caravan. It's quieter now. Camels sprawled like rugs, people dozing or chewing or humming. You lie down, close your eyes. Let the city hum around you. You'll leave again soon. There's always another route, another trade, another city on the other side of another 100 dunes. But for now, you are here. You are whole. You are enough. And the air smells like cinnamon and beginnings. The city is still asleep when you rise. The sun hasn't crested the rooftops yet. The streets are quiet, just a dog yawning, a broom sweeping softly, a merchant arranging figs like they're precious stones. You stretch. Your joints creak like old door hinges. But the ache is familiar now. Comforting, almost. Proof that you've moved through the world, that you've arrived, that you belong. You sip a small cup of bitter tea. Let it warm your fingers. Let the steam kiss your cheek. Let your thoughts wander. You should be resting. You should be savoring the stillness. But already, you're thinking about the next journey. Because that's how it is, isn't it? The moment you arrive, something inside you whispers, "What's next?" Not out of impatience, not out of greed, just curiosity. The desert did something to you, changed your pace, softened your voice, sharpened your eyes. Now every alley looks like a possible path. Every whisper of wind feels like an invitation. Every map you see makes your fingers itch. You walk through the morning market. You're not buying anything. You just want to feel the rhythm, the thump of baskets being lowered, the gentle splash of water poured into clay jars, the quiet greetings exchanged between people who've known each other longer than the roads that brought them here. You recognize things now, not the names, not the signs, but the feeling, the hush before departure, the glance a trader gives their camel, the way someone double-checks the strap on a pack they've tied 1,000 times. It's all beginning again. Fareed waves from a stall where he's buying far too many dates. The boy appears with new shoes, too new. He'll regret that. Your camel is chewing slowly, patiently, watching you with that familiar look. Are we doing this again? You nod. You tie your scarf, sling your bag, adjust the blanket under the saddle. The caravan is smaller this time. Different faces, different goods, but the same rhythm. You fall into step. No one tells you where to go, you already know. The road welcomes you back with a sigh. The dust rises beneath your boots like it missed you. The wind wraps around your shoulders like a cloak you forgot you owned. And slowly the city fades behind you. Its scent lingers, spices smoke stories, but its voice grows softer until all that's left is the road ahead and the sound of quiet feet and the slow, patient hum of a camel beside you. You don't think about how far it is. You don't think about the heat. You don't think about the end. You just walk, one step, then another, then another. And the desert, old and knowing, watches you return. Not with a roar, not with a storm, but with silence and sky and the soft, endless welcome of somewhere to go. You've finished the journey, but the desert is still there waiting. Sleep now. There will be more walking, but not today.